UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Good evening and welcome to UAP Crossfire, where the alpha males get together and try to outshine each other and stuff. Welcome to the show. Hey, Padre, before we start the show, give me a blessing, will you? Give me one of those blessings, will you?
Lord bless you and keep you. Lord make his face to shine upon you.
Yeah, so we don't screw up on the show tonight. All right, thank you. Yep. Anyways, welcome to the show. And we got a great guest tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun because we're talking about a Colorado ranch and how this, our guest, I'm going to keep it a little secret for right now, lived on this ranch and all the high strangeness of this Colorado ranch. And it's really interesting, and I think you're going to love it. But first, let me introduce Dan, the Padre Carlson, who's right on top of me. I don't know which way. That way. Okay. And that guy frowning in the bottom there, he's a silverback of ufology, one of the greatest ufologists you'll ever see. Look at him there. Come on, throw me a smile. Throw me a smile. There he goes. Okay. Dandy Don Eckert. I love this guy. He's the best. All right. And you sons of bitches out there, let me tell you something. Don't even try to fool with this guy and stuff. Anyways, Don, I want to open up and say, hey, Don, you discovered an article today with very fascinating about something came out of the White House. One of the lower level people in the White House was talking about our defense and stuff. And I think it's almost like, wow, this is amazing. If this guy doesn't go to a psychiatric ward, we could take this to the bank. Tell us about it.
Well, it's the science technology chief, all right? And he was making an address to a group down in Texas, and he said something that is provocative beyond the pale. He basically said the United States now has the capability of working with and bending space and time as we know it. Now, no additional information with that. But on the surface, all right, on the surface, this sounds beyond the ken to me. Now, when they say they can basically shape and bend time and space, what exactly was he talking about? He didn't elaborate, but just that is mind-boggling. Then President Trump made a remark that claimed that we now have weapons systems that basically would be astonishing to everybody. Once again, no data on that. What exactly he's talking about. It could be anything. But the bottom line is this is basically keeping everybody on their toes. Now, we all know that we are in a very deep competition with the People's Republic of China, the commies over there. Might this be a very soft way of cautioning them that they don't want to fool with us? I don't know. Reagan did it with his Star Wars initiative back in the mid-'80s against the Soviet Union. The Soviets tried to match us ruble per dollar, and they couldn't do it, and they ended up economically collapsing. This could be something similar to that, Chris, Padre.
Well, last week,
go ahead, Padre.
We had a general from Space Force who was speaking to Hillsdale College And he claimed that we have the technology right now to put anyone anywhere on the planet within 1 hour's time. Now, either you're putting someone in a missile and shooting them, or you can bend space and time. They might be related.
Well, NASA, has had or the Department of Defense, some type of craft that was in orbit for what, Chris? Well over a year.
Yeah.
That was totally black project. They barely even discussed it. We had no idea if it was a man craft, a robotic craft, whatever. And this thing could go hell bent for election. Now, the question may be, that could be what he's talking about. But when you're talking about bending space and time, I did just a little dive on it because we were getting close to the show. And there are some people out there already talking about some alleged secret government projects like Project Stargate. Now, that, of course, came out of the TV show that ran for years on the Sci-Fi Channel. If that is possibly a project that is deep black, I don't know. But there are people that have already started to discuss this. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, if anywhere.
The one thing about this is that there's always been talk about bending space and time. I remember talking to a person down in Pine Valley, or I should say Tuxedo Park in the valley down there, that there was a think tank in Tuxedo Park that they used to have some of the brightest people go down there, pretty much lock them in a room and give them, say, okay, manipulate time and space, and how do you do it? And they would actually come up with the equations to do all that. And so these think tanks were, they weren't on some super secret base. They were right out there because all they do were working on mathematics and equations. So years ago, they were talking about that they were on the brink of trying to do that. Now, I remember our guest tonight, Katie Paige, and I were in a sort of saw a PowerPoint that a person high-ranking in MUFON gave us, talking about Stargate and some of the other projects that were at Area 51 and S4. One of them, I can remember him saying it, that he says, oh, yeah, you can walk into this room, open the door, and as you open the other door, you're in Australia at Pine Gap. And I went, what did he just say? And he, he confirmed it. He said, he basically said that we have the way to do teleportation.
Who was this guy?
I'm not going to say his name on the air, but Katie will know.
What was he? Was he MUFON? Was he MUFON?
Yeah.
Did you say? Yeah. Well, then I have one question.
Sure.
Unless he was in the government, how the hell would he know?
Well, he was probably in the government and stuff. I do not want to put his name out on the air.
No. That's fine.
But I will tell you that he probably was involved with an intelligence service one way or another. I've talked to people about this, and everybody kind of agrees and says, yeah, this guy probably was involved with the intelligence service because he knew Area 51 so well. He mentioned things. What's that, Don?
When I first came on board at UFO Magazine, back in the late 80s, and of course, with my background in the military, what I was involved with, I certainly believed this. But my then publisher, who became my wife, told me early on, the UFO field is a place where intelligence and the military routinely sow the fields with copious amounts of bullshit. Now, you've always got to be very, very careful in this field because we see it all the time. Well, I could go off on a rant about that. I'm not gonna, but it's something I got to say. I'm skeptical until I can get a little more data about it. But hey, that's me.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to bring in our guest tonight because she might have some information on this, and we want to also talk about the Colorado Ranch. So, without further ado, Katie Paige. Hi,
hey.
Katie.
Hi,
As you know, Katie Paige used to do MUFON What's Up. She had a great show on this KGRA, and then she broke off for bigger and better things. I don't know what's better than KGRA, but
that's right.
She's doing really well. But, however, she's now on all kinds of television programs, and she is one hell of an investigator. So, Katie, we were just talking about a PowerPoint presentation that you and I were invited to watch. Do you remember that?
I remember several because this individual that you're speaking of was a very high up in MUFON. He was COO and a very mysterious man. And as fate would have it, he just spoke to Colorado MUFON this last Saturday. So I just saw him. Yeah, I just saw him and saw his new presentation on disclosure. But he's a man of intrigue and mystery. Comes out of France. I think he had ties to Interpol and S4 and Area 51. And he set up the MUFON Mars project, which, Chris, you were a part of. And we did all the redacting on all the old paper files. And he's an interesting guy and a friend. I kind of called him out when we found out that he kind of set up the Mars program for MUFON for Lou Elizondo and ATIP, and all those went over to them. And, it was this whole kind of cool thing we all went through, right, Chris? But he's still involved in the field. He keeps tabs on what's going on, which is also interesting, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So he gave a great presentation last week about what he thinks about disclosure, and basically, in a nutshell, he when talking about the drones and that, he kind of hinted to the fact that perhaps they are China drones, as I believe the manifesto that came out of the Las Vegas Tesla car bombing. He had this manifesto about them being China drones. And he was out of the Air Force Academy here in Colorado Springs, and that story was buried. And when they bury a story, I tend to believe it because I'm like, where did that story go? It must be true. And he kind of hinted to that, like the reason we're not shooting them down is because it would be an act of war. And so I thought that was an interesting take on that.
Katie, that is not correct.
No, it's not correct. Oh,
if it's a foreign aerial vehicle
out of the red corner
overflying the United States, that in itself, if they're not authorized, is a hostile act. Right. And if they are Chinese, we would have every right in the world not only to shoot them down, but I'm sure Trump would probably put another 500% on Chinese tariffs.
Yeah, but he wasn't president at the time. Don't
you think that I'm in a room full of alpha males? I love it. As an INFJ alpha female, I can duke it out. But don't you think, though, that if we did that, that would be kind of the start of maybe the next step to something worse? No, you don't. Oh, we would like, or maybe we're not ready to show our hand yet, because if what you're saying is true and we're able to warp time and bend time, which could be in reference to Project Looking Glass, and I've talked to other people who say we're 30, 40 years more advanced than the general public knows, which I tend to believe. And if we're able to do that, maybe we don't want to show all our hands quite yet until things get worse. I don't know.
Tell me what Looking Glass is.
Ken's, I almost said his name. KSJ talked about this Project Looking Glass, which basically gave us the ability to jump time or time travel. And according to his presentation in that, things got so convoluted with that, they had to shut the whole program down. It opened up basically a Pandora's box of a whole bunch of trouble. And that's kind of what that was. But he talked about a lot of different projects.
1989, after Bob Lazar was publicly identified by George Knapp, KLAS TV, Channel 8 in Las Vegas, Lazar talked about a device that the S4 people had allegedly from the extraterrestrials that was also Project Looking Glass.
Oh,
and in there, they claim, or Lazar, I believe it was Lazar that himself claimed that when they used it, they even, now Padre, you'll appreciate this, they even looked at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, okay, through this Project Looking Glass. This is Easter, basically, for all intents and purposes. I find that an oddity.
Well, I find it dangerous because there's not a technology humans haven't weaponized and turned into something dangerous. If time travel is reality, if we can put people through time, and it falls into the wrong hands or somebody who thinks that maybe they have a better way. And so they're going to go back in time and they're going to say, religion is the problem for all of our unrest in the world. So I'm going to shoot Jesus. I'm going to shoot Buddha. I'm going to shoot, the Dalai Lama or whoever in the cradle. And then the whole timeline gets messed up.
Well, you see, now here's the other thing about time travel. Theoretically, of course, we've already lived our history from beginning of humankind to today. Now, if we were to attempt and had the process to go back in time and change something that we knew from our history, the way it's been described to me, that would start an alternative timeline. Not necessarily our timeline, but it would branch off into another timeline. Not to get science fiction-y, but for example, the reboot of Star Trek, the motion pictures, okay, they dealt with that by calling it the Kelvin timeline as opposed to the original. Now, that's science fiction, but it was described to me an alternative timeline would pop into existence for whatever that's worth.
I'm going to tell you, I tend to believe this White House guy because remember what Ben Rich said. He gave a lecture, and in that lecture, he had said, whatever you could imagine, we've already done or thrown it away because we couldn't find a use for it. And from what I know about Ben Rich and his history, he was not the type of person to be flamboyant and speak out of turn or, and stuff. He was very down to earth and he was very level-headed type of guy.
And he also said we had the technology to drive ET home.
Yeah. So, we absolutely have to do that. Got to do a show on Ben Rich one of these days because I think that's important. But as Katie was saying, she was right on the money about this guy. Katie and I used to have talks all the time. Go, okay, what agency does this guy work for? Does he work for them? Does he work? Because he knew S4 like he lived there. Am I right, Katie?
That's right. He's actually going to hopefully in the future do his presentation again. And of course, it's a matter. And, part of me, I'm always skeptical, and I'm not the most trusting person in the world, probably because of my experiences on the ranch. So even though I love the guy and he's a friend, I'm always looking out for those Richard Doty's of the world. So I'm always questioning because you don't know, because he has told, I've been at some of his presentations talking about S4 and the ETs we have there and how they absorb nutrients through their skin and things that are like mind-blowing information. And then I leave those presentations and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to go pick up my mom's meds and get some coffee creamer. I just heard this crazy stuff. Is it true? I don't know if that's true. I'm a person who likes to see documents, which is a good lead into this, which we'll be talking about.
Yeah, we are definitely going to talk about Snippy the horse.
Well, Snippy the horse, but
38 years ago, which was the end of the 1980s, when I officially became involved in the field as the director of research for UFO Magazine. I got that very same story, Katie, about the aliens taking nourishment through their skin from
protein,
none other than John Lear.
Oh,
now
there you go.
John Lear, okay, was a separate story all in himself. But at that time, he was telling me and anybody else that would listen that the ETs, the gray guys, okay, the big eyes, a little short, etc., were rendering human beings down, and I jokingly called it nutrient soup, okay, to derive nourishment that they would then sponge on their skin. Now, this stuff was right out of Wonderland. So this guy, well, boy, would I love to talk to this guy that you know.
We'll set that up.
We'll try. Hey, you never know. Well, maybe we can get.
Well, everybody else in the field right now avoid me like the bubonic plague. And I'm sure this guy would check me out. And I'm sure if he's connected. And I'm also sure that he would talk probably to the Pentagon, who do not hold me in high regard since I busted one of their secret covert, flights, STS-48 flight, on national television when they were shooting at something. So, yeah. And that's why people like Lou Elizondo today, one of the names in the lights and disclosure movement, will have nothing to do with me because he knows I'm going to ask inconvenient questions.
Let me ask Katie a question before we get to the Colorado Ranch, because you okay, Padre?
Yeah, I was
going to say,
let's ask Katie some inconvenient questions on Ranch, Colorado.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that. But the one thing I wanted to ask her about is, Katie, have you worked with Lou Elizondo at all yet?
No, not really. And I was just going to say maybe that's why I'm not climbing my way up the ladder as fast as I would like to be, because I tend to be a troublemaker too. And I wear my truth on the sleeve, whether, they like that or not. And even with the Colorado Ranch, I mean, one of the big questions I've always had was how much of this is Black access military projects? How much of this is, actual UFOs and aliens? And I go back and forth, and I just speak the truth as I see it. And so in a nutshell, if you want me to just kind of give the 2-minute version of my history with that,
Please.
Yeah, let's start with the Colorado Ranch. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and then we'll move into Snippy because, that's a whole great thing. And it ties actually very nicely into the Rocky Mountain Ranch. But long story short, and I'm going to give away my age a little bit here, but in mid-1975 to the late 1970s, my mom was a key punch operator for United Airlines here in the Denver Tech Center in Colorado. She started dating a gentleman by the name of Jack, and who had a ranch in Elbert County, Colorado. And so I did not live on this property full time. They had 3 sons. The 2 younger boys lived with us during the week. So we'd travel back and forth on the weekends, to go see their mom, spend time at the ranch, things like that. Every time we went out to this ranch property, crazy things were happening. We were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened out there. I never knew it was investigated, never knew anything, never knew anybody knew anything about it. And so my sister, my mom, and I all had experiences out there. Fast forward to when I joined MUFON back in 2012, I started, I was obviously curious about all those things that were happening out on the ranch property. This is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start as an investigative journalist, looking into all the mutilations. John Schuessler, who, is one of the founding fathers of MUFON, bestowed upon me the original briefing document of the ranch. It was known as the Clearview Ranch back in the day. I renamed it the Rocky Mountain Ranch because that's what Beyond Skinwalker's History Channel calls it, the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And it started ever since then looking and doing a deep dive into the ranch of my childhood and the experiences I had there. So that's kind of how I'm connected to this property.
Well,
what county is it in?
Go ahead, Dan.
What county was it in?
It's in Elbert County, Colorado. And if anybody, I always keep it here. So how I learned about the ranch is I bought this book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. And in this book is a chapter called Other Hotspots. And I started reading about the ranch in Colorado, and I knew the strange dynamics of the family because the gentleman my mom was dating, actually, he was separated from his wife. They never did get divorced. My mom dated him for several years, and she was dating another gentleman by the name of John Duke, who claimed to be Air Force Command out of San Francisco. So I've kind of investigated the MK Ultra side of things. We know that there were soldiers there from Camp Carson or Fort Carson on the property. So it's kind of been this deep dive into there's possible, experiments going on out there. And it could even tie into my half brother who was in the state hospital in Pueblo at the time. So those two never divorced. So I knew that it was a weird, I mean, it was the 70s, free love and all. So it had a weird family dynamic. But that's how I learned about the ranch in my childhood. And in this book, they talk about 3 PhDs that were there. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD out of Laramie, Wyoming, and his archives are housed at the Heritage Center in Wyoming and Laramie, and Dr. John Durr and Peter Van Arsdale. And Peter Van Arsdale and John Durr are still alive, so I'm in contact with them still. But I like I said, I'm really interested in to know how much of it was like MK Ultra, Black Access projects, working with plasma ball technologies and different things, and how much of it was actual UFO paranormal. And it wasn't until really I bought, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon that I started tying together in all the paranormal shadow figures, all the weird things that's kind of followed me around my whole life, that I'm like, okay, there's more to this than meets the eye. Because this stuff I can't deny, like the ghosty kind of stuff, but the other things like the disembodied electronic voice and that, I think they were working with like plasma ball technology in the late 70s.
Well, Katie, you said something that kind of left me anyway hanging, and I'm sure a lot of our audience. You said that when you were out there at this ranch, you had a lot of strange things happen to you. Mm-hmm. What?
Right. So some of the things that were first reported there that I witnessed as well, my sister and my mom, were these strange hums, very much like the Taos hum, bangs and sounds underground. And I mean, we looked at cisterns and that. We know the Titan missile silos were close by. Sometimes this hum would get so loud you couldn't hear yourself speak over it. And anytime this hum would come, weird other stuff would happen. So you name it, it happened on this ranch, just very similar to the Skinwalker Ranch. We had cryptids that were reported there. We had balls of light and orbs. Something that happened to me specifically that actually is in the report, and it was cool to see it in the report. And it's a weird kind of memory that you just have, but it was like in Colorado in the springtime, we get this wet, heavy snow, but it's a nice blue sky. So me and my sister go out in front of the ranch house and we're flipping the Frisbee, and we look down at the ground and there's this big, large circle of just dry dirt where nothing grew. The investigator and me later, was there a silo there? What? But there was never anything there. And there was like 3 to 4 inches of snow on outside of the snowless circle. In the report, it talks about this. They measured it as being 75 feet in diameter, which ties into the Snippy case because there was a 75-inch diameter circle at the Snippy case. But anyway, and nothing grew. And in the report, it said there were drops of blood outside the snowless circle. And even in the latest episode of Investigation Alien, that first episode with George Knapp, where he talks to these mutilations that are going on right now in Oregon, they talk to, I think, what was his name? Hunt, I think. But he's like a fifth generational rancher, is having mutilations right now, shoots at some, UAP or UFO in the sky, and there's a large circle on his property as well. So we witnessed this large, strange circle. And actually in the report, it says there were 2 of these on the property. I only remember the one. There are these strange disappearing boxes. I had a daytime encounter with a box. There were supposed interactions with ET. There were 2 types of ET said to be on the property, these tall Nordics and these tubey guys, as Paul Giamatti puts it, that they're like kind of almost AI. What else was reported? Oh, the strange, and you might recognize this, Don. Where's my choppers in the choppers? But there were many, many, many dozens of, here it is. This right here, the choppers in the choppers. So many reports of mysterious blacked out helicopters, menacing people, chasing people. And in Laughlin, when I was speaking at a conference, Richard Doty happened to be speaking there. And so I kind of cornered Richard Doty. And I'm like, okay, I have 2 questions for you. I want to know, number one, because he came in as a disinformation officer in 1977. And so these years.
Well, he was an officer.
Or disinformation person.
NCO. He was a non-commissioned officer. Okay.
Non-commissioned officer.
One of your questions should have been, because if I ever run into this guy, I'm sure going to ask him, He was in OSI. Why did they dump him out of OSI and he spent the rest of his Air Force career in food service?
Ooh.
Now that should tell you something.
That's a hell of a demotion.
What that tells me is his answers to my two questions might not be true. That's what that tells me. But one question I had was, were you aware of the ranch property in Elbert County? He said he was. The second thing was, and I want to get into this because I love this part. So in the report, there were two interceptors, A-7Ds, that were scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base, which is now Space Force. And they were in pursuit of a UFO, according to Dr. Leo Sprinkle's files. And the pilot hits the tail, and both interceptors crash. Both pilots eject and survive. This happened on November 11th, 1975. So I asked Richard Doty about that. And he goes, if you want information about that, send a FOIA request, which I did. It's right here. It's nice, big, and thick.
Holy cow.
To the mishaps office, at Kirkland. So I have it here. Which is interesting. Another interesting story with this, I was getting an emissions test for my youngest son's car at the time in Parker, Colorado, and the phone rings on my cell phone, and it's United States Air Force. I'm like, I better answer this. And it was the head of FOIA. We talked for 20 minutes on the phone about Elbert County, Colorado in the 70s. And he goes, I'll tell you what, if you ever want to send another FOIA about Elbert County, you call me personally. I was like, holy shit. Anyway, that scared me. Anyway, but what's interesting about this, in doing a deep dive on November 11th, 1975, I find out, I want to show you some of these redacted pages. I find out there was an incident in Falconbridge, Ontario, where there are several UFOs, UAPs seen on radar in Canada. They're watching them go from 26,000 feet in altitude up to 72,000 feet and shooting straight up. They're watching them for a long time, and they have eyes on them from military men and women, civilians, police officers. So they decide to scramble two F-106 Delta Darts out of Falconbridge, Ontario, over the Great Lakes. They were traveling 35 nautical miles over the Great Lakes. So on the same day as they're scrambling jets in Elbert County, which I'll get into what they say the cause of the crash is, they're scrambling jets out of Falconbridge or Selfridge, Michigan, over the Great Lakes. So I also find out on November 11, 1975, at 12:06 a.m. in the morning, guess who's returning from his abduction encounter? Travis Walton.
No way.
Travis Walton is being returned at 12:06 a.m. November 11th, 1975. So last year at Contact in the Desert, I walk up to Travis. I'm like, did you know about these 4 interceptors that are scrambled across the country? And he goes, yeah, you know what else happened on November 11th, 1975? And I'm like, no, what? He said, the Edmund Fitzgerald goes down and 29 men go missing on the Great Lakes. So Edmund Fitzgerald goes down, but I think they recovered one of the bodies now. And we have interceptor scrambled across the country. But then get this, it gets even better. So just a few months ago, I'm doing some research on the old Snippy case, because we did a deep dive on the Snippy case. And not only is Dr. Leo Sprinkle's archives at the Heritage Laramie Center in Wyoming, so is Richard Haynes. Richard Haynes was all about all the airline sightings. So commercial airlines, private airlines, military, pilots. Specialized in pilots. His collection is so well organized. So I'm like, so I pull the boxes and I want to look at November 11th, 1975. Well, there was a wave of sightings in October and November from, I believe it wasn't Delta. I'm trying to remember the airline right now. I have them all now on record. I'm going through them, but there was this huge wave of pilot sightings during this whole month, of October and November and it kind of stopped right there at November 11th. So something was going on then, but it ties into the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And what's interesting about this, here's some of the redaction. Some of the causes of this crash, they say it was an instructor pilot and a student pilot. And the instructor misidentifies the rotating beacon light of another aircraft, which the tower transcripts don't don't identify
Don't say
it's
it or
never
anything, yeah.
doesn't identify it anywhere in this report. And so he hits the tail of the student and both of them go down and crash. But what else is interesting about this report is they say that 8 of the instrumentation cockpit lights of the instructor go out during this encounter. And it gives us specific instrumentations that went out. All of them have to do, because my son actually just graduated as an aviation mechanic. I'm like, what do these have in common? And maybe static electricity could cause them to fail. So that was interesting. And then the other thing was they had 218 live rounds of ammunition on board this students and instructors aircraft flying over residential neighborhoods in Elbert County. So it's all very suspicious to me. And of course, I'm reading the documents, and as it gets really juicy, it's all blacked out. So yeah, it's really, that's November 11, 1975, interesting date.
I would say so. My God, Katie, and how hard was it to get that report? Was it difficult?
Well, getting past the phone call, and naive little me, I'm on the phone going, well, I'm doing a report. Like, I'm sure if they just Googled my name, and at the time I was Katie Grabowski, I've changed my name to Katie Paige, but I'm sure if they just did a Google search of my name, they knew what I was into. Like, I was just trying to play stupid. I don't know. I don't know anything about the cattle mutilations. And that, by the way, was the biggest thing happening out in Elbert County at the time, were these just rash of mutilations of not only cow, but horse and sheep and dog. And so much so I have a whole folder here of the old newspaper articles, and some came from your magazine. I have a whole bunch of your magazines right here. But they had the Cattlemen's Association for 1976-77, $10,000 was a lot of money. And there was a $10,000 reward to catch these perpetrators of these mutilations. And so you had ranchers arming themselves, watching the skies all the time, trying to figure out who's flying these damn helicopters and mutilating these animals, and nobody ever caught anything. And one of the questions I had is, are these still happening today? And being on Beyond Skinwalker has allowed me to kind of talk with some of these ranchers that have been ranchers for 50 plus years. And yes, mutilations are still going on to this day.
You don't hear much about them, though, anymore, though, Katie. Very rarely is there anything in the news about cattle mutilations and stuff, and it's still going on today. Let me ask you this. At the High Strangeness Ranch, I call it the High Strangeness Ranch because there's a lot of things.
Good name.
You have mentioned a cube. Now, there was like a cube, the very mysterious box or cube. Can you tell us all about that, the history of it and everything?
Yeah, the boxes, are something I didn't talk about for a long time because it just sounds like you're insane. Like, they're not aerodynamic. Boxes don't fly. What are these weird things? But there are reports by several adults in the situation. I witnessed it with the youngest son and my mom's boyfriend. We're in the pickup truck. We get something out of this little outbuilding.
How old were you, Katie?
At that time, I was 10. I would have been 10 because I was like 9, 10, 11. Into 12 through these years. And so at that time I was most likely 10 years old. I'm thinking that's about right. And anyway, so we're in we stop and get something out of the outbuilding, and behind the ranch house were pine to Rosa pine. So it was very forested in the back of the ranch house. So we were going to go on this road behind the ranch house. I'm not even sure why, but we're in the truck, and Jack pulls over the truck. I don't know why, once again, but we hear a strange sound. It sounded like bees, like a electron, like if you've ever stood under power lines. And I look over, and about 3 to 4 feet off the ground is this box like this. It was illuminated from the inside, and Jack's yelling at us, get in the truck, it's the box, it's the box, it's the box.
How big was it?
It was like this. So bigger than a shoebox, maybe 18, 20 inches long,
Katie,
maybe 8 inch. Yeah. And I looked back and the thing was gone. And it was reported by several adults, even the undersheriff, Bill Waugh. So there was George Yarnell was a sheriff, Bill Waugh, and both of them are featured in A Strange Harvest, Linda Moulton Howe's movie, which, by the way, she just sent me another copy of, so I'm excited to get it. So Bill Waugh was on patrol one night, and he said there was a tree and this illuminated box that he didn't want to approach it. So he goes into the town of Kiowa, gets a posse sheriff, he says. They go back in the squad car, and he said it was as if the tree and the box went underground, like through a portal, speaking of time travels or whatever. Yeah. And so this was witnessed by a police officer and his posse, many adults. But what's weird about the boxes, and there's a place, a good friend of mine, Trey Hudson, he has the South's Meadow, the Meadow Project down south. And they had on floor camera a large box where some of the investigators walked in, disappeared, and come out the other side. There's boxes reported. Nellie Lewis and Burrell reported seeing a box out in the San Luis Valley in the Snippy case that I just uncovered. And going down to the National Historical Record Center. Oh, I just put something out so I could share that. I don't know what I did with it now. But David Marler has the National UFO Historical Record Center out in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. And he has his processing room of things he hasn't processed yet. And he had a drawing of a really cool box encounter with these several boxes in it. But every now and again, you'll come across these strange box encounters. And one person after a conference came up to me and said, maybe since these boxes have a tone or a frequency to them, maybe, and they're sometimes seen around mutilated animals, and in interviewing some of these ranchers that have these cattle, one witness said that in the pastures where the mutilations are being done, the cattle are all kind of herded together and calm. And in adjoining pastures, they're all freaked out. So maybe she said they're emitting a tone to kind of hypnotize them or paralyze them or keep them calm or mark them in some way. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know, but that's, possible. I don't know.
Katie, one thing you mentioned, and I've developed an inordinate interest in the phenomenon of cryptids. You said you had cryptids out there. What kind of
Yes,
cryptids?
So we had reports of large birds, and we had Bigfoot or Sasquatch creatures. My mom, when I was a kid, called them white fuzzies because they were gray-haired.
3 or 5 toes?
Well, let me show you. I have a sketch of them somewhere.
3 or 5 toes.
I don't know on the toes. I don't remember the toes. I don't know if I ever saw the toes.
I'm a little naive on the toes. What's the toes got?
Yeah,
there are two types of Sasquatch that have been identified. The more natural
here we go.
Sasquatch has 5 toes, 5 fingers, as witnesses have described them. The Sasquatches with UFO association are the 3-toed variety.
Interesting. Let's see if he has feet. No toes. Darn it. But this was a sketch from Dr. Leo Sprinkle's file. And what's fascinating about this sketch is years ago, I was talking to Robert or Bob Salas about Malmstrom. And he sent me an email with some sketches. He said that people up in Malmstrom, this is where the silos went down and everything, the nukes went down. He said they were seeing Sasquatch out there. And he sent me a drawing. He said they were giving men and women lie detector tests, to see about if they're telling the truth or not. And one of them, I think his name was Jason Sands. Does that sound right? Something Sands. It might not be Jason. Something Sands drew a sketch of the Sasquatch creature, and it's almost identical to this one seen at Elbert County. So they had these Bigfoot creatures out there at Malmstrom as well. And I thought that was interesting because you don't really hear much about that. And he said, this is into confirmation to your story in Elbert County. These are the tubey guys that were seen out there. This was in Dr. Sprinkle's files.
Now that was on the ranch. Wasn't one of these creatures on the ranch?
I never claim I saw any ETs out there, but the adults claim to see these tubey guys, and they also saw these blonde, blue-eyed Nordics, and they said they were in conflict with one another. What's fascinating about this, though, because this guy's kind of unusual, right? So, I kind of kept it in my back pocket, and at the time I was the guest speaker coordinator for Colorado MUFON, and we invited a gentleman to come speak named Sean Bartok, who wrote a book called Flashbacks. And I come to find out in the book, he claims his property was in Castle Rock, Colorado. It was actually only 14 miles away from the ranch in my childhood. And I'm watching his presentation, and up comes this drawing, this right here. And he said, these tubes come out. And there was a second drawing. I don't know if I have that one. Let me see. I should have it. Hopefully. No, I don't. I don't know why. And anyway, but look at these two side by side. And we didn't know each other. I mean, the shape of the eyes, the wrinkles, the brows, the mouth is pretty wild.
Other than the one on one side looks like he's about 30 years older than the other one.
Yeah, it's his dad. I'm thinking it's his dad.
One other thing about those two types.
I didn't think of it that way, but hey, what the hell?
One other thing about those two types of Sasquatch. The one with the five-toed are a bit, I'm not going to say docile, but they're not, as a rule, aggressive. The three-toed variety has been described as very aggressive.
Well, these guys were pounding and banging on the ranch house, would watch you from the barns and the silo. That was something I remember from my childhood, is always feeling a sense of being watched, whether I was at the ranch or at my home 45 minutes away. We lived 45 minutes away. Did you ever see one,
Katie? Did you ever see a Sasquatch?
Well, no, I've had one kind of Bigfoot encounter, if you want to call it that. And this was just recently, maybe 5 years ago. I had land up in Bailey, Colorado, which is really close to the Sasquatch Outpost by Jim Myers, has it out here in Bailey, Colorado. And we had just put a 6-foot water feature on our property next to the cabin, and it was just dusk. So you know how you see deer and stuff when it's dusk outside? Well, it was dusk. We just put this water fountain feature on our land, and in the front of the cabin, I hear a big bam, like a tree knock kind of thing. And I was startled. I was there by myself. I was waiting for my husband at the time and my daughter to get there, my youngest son. And all of a sudden it smelled like a dead body to me. It was not a bear. It was the worst smell I have ever smelled. And I got really uncomfortable. And I went into the cabin and I waited for them to get there. What's interesting about that, once they arrived, we were walking out back, because I was brave now, because, I have people around me, and the smell kind of traveled. I could still smell the thing. And then the next day when the sun came out, I'm looking for any tracks or hair or any evidence at all. But up here in Colorado, it was so dry. I mean, there wouldn't have been any tracks. I couldn't find any evidence. But that smell is something I'll never, ever forget. So I don't know if that was a Bigfoot or not, or a really smelly bear. I don't know.
A couple questions for you, Katie. How many acres is the ranch?
The ranch was 60 acres. But at the time in the 70s, in the town of Kiowa, it sat higher than anywhere else. So the elevation of it kind of sat at the top, because I pulled all the geological and the maps of that county. And also at the time, you had a lot of all the properties out there there were no neighborhoods in the town at the time. So really, you didn't have any close neighbors either. And one of the things in going to the Elbert County Historical or the museum, I pulled all the records from who owned the property before, because one of my questions was, do we have any evidence of anything's happening before the 70s? And there was a gentleman, it was known as the Mulligan Homestead. And there was a gentleman born and raised on the property by the name of Dick Mulligan. And if you search Dick Mulligan on a Google search, it'll say he's an Irishman born in Kiowa. And he later in his life became the caretaker for Winter Park Ski Resort, but he had the gift of gab and bold exaggeration. That's how he was known throughout his life. And I'm thinking that, Dick, he wasn't exaggerating. He was probably trying to tell people what the heck he was experiencing on the ranch. And they're like, you're so funny, and he had this reputation. And even talking to neighbors, they were seeing balls of light flying on and off this property for decades. So I think the phenomenon predated the military presence, because that was always my question: which came first, the chicken or the egg, the military or the activity? And it looks like the activity came first.
Katie, did you see this as a possible interdimensional phenomenon?
I do now. I didn't then. I mean, and that's something kind of funny, when you're a little kid, of course, anything like this. First of all, when your parents tell you not to talk about what's happening, and that came from my scariest night on the ranch, it was the boys' mother's birthday. All the adults were playing board games and hanging out in the living room at the house on the ranch. And me, my sister, and the 3 boys were hanging out in the boys' bedroom. And, it was after midnight. It was really late. And I'm the youngest of the kids. But all of a sudden the hum starts, and it was loud, and it's a low tone. It's like a hum. I could still hear it in my head. Power goes out in the house. The brightest light I've ever seen out that boys' window. No sound. It wasn't a helicopter, but it was like bright. And all the adults are freaking out. And at that time, this disembodied electronic sounding voice, and the only reason I know exactly what it says, it's because it's in that briefing document quoted. When I read it to my sister and my mom, they were like, had a PTSD moment about it. But it basically said, "Attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us." Now, in that, so that is terrifying when you're a little girl. My sister and I were terrified. But now I researched something called plasma ball technology, and that's where they pipe out this electronic sounding voice. Sounds just like it. It sounds exactly like it. And
what do you know about plasma ball technology, Katie? Well,
not much other than the little videos I've seen on Google and YouTube and stuff. But if you type in Google like plasma ball technology, there's examples of what it sounds like. And I know they were creating this like for battle, so they wouldn't risk men and women's lives, and they would be able to pump out sound into the battlefield or wherever, so people would think people were there when they're not there. But it certainly sounds a lot like what I heard when I was a kid. That's for darn sure. And then to do a deeper dive on this mysterious John Duke person who claims to come from San Francisco and was part of Air Defense Command. And we know in Dr. Sprinkle's in Dr. Sprinkle's files, they're like, Warren, and his last name was redacted out, visits the ranch, felt something wrong, wouldn't walk towards the woods, felt something take over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him. He would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 times. First of all, why is there a soldier there from Carson? Why are they there? And then they talk about that they would have homeless people and vagrants visit the ranch. Then they also talk about, John Duke says in the report, I was taking legal LSD. Okay. I don't know about you, but I don't know about legal LSD. But after Contact in the Desert last year, I stopped to do an interview with a widow and a daughter of an ex-CIA agent who had property in a second home in the San Luis Valley, which, by the way, Crestone in the San Luis Valley is crawling with feds. Yeah, Oppenheimers and you name it. But they owned the property at Dulce. Okay. And before his dad died, they talked about this CIA MK Ultra kind of stuff that they called FM that they were experimenting with. It stands for freaking magic, which is a combination of LSD and other drugs. And I'm thinking, are they doing that on the ranch? And is this all, John Duke's hallucination or other people's hallucinations? I don't know, but it's certainly compelling evidence.
It was told, Katie, that on Skinwalker Ranch, because I actually talked to one of them, he's now a police officer, but he was working with Bigelow at the time, and he was sent to the ranch not knowing anything about it, and they were monitoring him to see what effects he would get. And I think, if I remember right, he actually had to meet with Dr. Kit Green. I'm sure you know that name. And because of possibly radiation exposure while he was on that ranch. So I'm sure you're talking about exactly the same thing, kind of experiment that they were doing on your ranch, and Skinwalker with all kinds of drugs and everything else. But I do want to ask you this before you go to break. There was a unbelievable story. I mean, it was a great story about a deputy that actually came out and investigated it. And he got so scared because there was a voice talking to him, and he jumped back in his car and he took off. And did the voice follow him or something like that?
I don't know if it followed him, but Bill Waugh, he, it was interesting. That. Yeah, it was interesting interviewing his widow. I flew to Florida, interviewed his widow and his son, and it was fascinating. All the things, both hitchhiker effect and things that they experienced. And what I found most fascinating about that was the interaction with NORAD, and he was getting directives from Air Force heads and NORAD to downplay the mutilations. They had these big maps in the station and at the sheriff's office where they were pinpointing all these mutilations, because it wasn't just the ranch. It was all over across the county in Colorado, from Montana to Wyoming to Oklahoma to Texas. Texas had a lot, New Mexico. And they were trying to track all these mysterious helicopters and mutilations. And sometimes they'd have a mutilation, they said, in Montana and one in Colorado almost at the same time. There's a lot of witnesses. I have a spreadsheet of over 250 people. So this wasn't just, if this all just came from John Duke, I would have dismissed all of it or, whatever. And the things that we experienced. But we have so many people that experience things. I just can't.
Speaking of mutilations, Katie, did you ever hear any rumors or come across anything that spoke about human mutilations?
Yeah. I mean, that's something people don't like to talk about, but you just a search on the dark web, and there's horrific photographs of human mutilations. And that was one of the reasons the Colorado Bureau of Investigations got involved in everything, because people were arming themselves, really afraid they were going to go to humans next. So there was definitely a panic about what was happening out there. I mean,
I was the lead investigator on that for about not quite 4 years.
No, I didn't know that.
On human mutilations, yes.
Oh, I want to hear more.
Yeah, well, this is your show.
Well, now I want to interview you.
The lady's always right, Don. If she wants to hear it, she wants to hear it.
So is that real? Can you just say if it's real?
Oh, very real.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but Don, and I will say this, I've had human mutilation investigations, and they always contribute to a serial killer. No matter what the thing is, it's a serial killer. It's a serial killer.
That depends. Okay. It depends on the death. It depends upon the type of mutilation. Human mutilations are extremely similar to cattle mutilations, precise surgical techniques. Vicky, my wife, Vicky, and I, when we were publishing UFO magazine, came across a piece of technology that we reported on in the magazine. The Air Force medics were issued lasers to suture up and cauterize wounds on the battlefield. This would have been a perfect complement to these mutilations. It made those precise type of cuts and cauterized as it cut.
We're gonna cut right there because we got to go to break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about Snippy the horse. I'm fascinated with that. Don't go away. Snippy's next. We are back.
Just made it.
Just made it back.
Hey,
Don, I cut you off, but go ahead and finish, and then I think the Padre had a question for Katie, and then we're gonna get into Snippy the horse.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, Linda Howe noticed what was then described as a cookie cutter incision, all right, on these wounds, usually around the eye. I investigated 2 as a police officer, 2 cattle mutes, and the rectum, and sexual organs had been removed. And these cookie cutter, what the hell do you call them? Indications were on the animal itself. Now, something else that I always found extremely interesting with these mutilated animals, predators, coyotes, birds of prey, what have you, would never touch them.
That's right.
There was something about these animals that the predators and turkey buzzards, those type of things that would normally be on that like a duck on a June bug, wouldn't go near them. So there was something very, very off about these animals.
That's true.
So the question that I had, Katie, that area of Colorado, well, actually all of Colorado, very intriguing indigenous peoples, cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any artifacts on the ranch or petroglyphs nearby that might contain some historical insights into things that existed before white people came?
Absolutely. This was a very nomadic area. We had tribes that aligned with each other. We had the Ute, Cheyenne, Comanche, Pawnee, Cherokee, Kiowa, Comanche, and they used these grounds as like hunting grounds. So it wasn't really a permanent residence, so to speak, right? It was seasonal. But there was the Shaman Cave that's really close by. It's still actually very strange area. A lot of horrific battlefields. As a matter of fact, one of the most horrific was really close to the ranch house that started the Sand Creek Massacre. And actually, there was just on my Facebook, I think I pulled it down, but there's a Sand Creek Massacre going, memorial going into the city of Denver. Now it's replacing another one that was destroyed. But so, and John Dover's ancestors were massacred at the Sand Creek Massacre. So we've had some discussions about that, but a lot of horrific things like across the whole country, really, but very specifically in that area. And another interesting thing that I took a look at in these places of high strangeness, they all ping the charts, and I mean all, by like Blind Frog Ranch, the Skinwalker Ranch, the Elbert County or Rocky Mountain Ranch, even Bradshaw up in Sedona. There's the Ohio Pile, Pennsylvania case, and others. And with a few little outliers, almost all of them ping the charts as being highly magnetic. They all share very geological types of, limestone, crystal, quartz crystals, silver, gold. And in fact, in the reports, it states gold. That, of course, the Great Gold Rush. And they all have water features, whether lakes, rivers, or streams, or aquifers. And right where the ranch sits in my childhood, there's two major aquifers that come together, the Dawson and the Denver. And so they have different levels of water table. So, and David Pilates talks about it in his Missing 401. That's another interesting case, by the way, with the box, is the Carl Higdon case, 1974, out of Medicine Bow, Wyoming. That's a whole interesting case, too. But again, highly magnetic. There's an elk connection. It's just, it goes deep, deep, deep. And so, the people on the ranch, Dan, would leave offerings of silver and turquoise. And they would, like, in the reports, it states that John Duke and whoever else was on the ranch would kind of bait the land with silver and other precious metals. And when they did this, the activity would rise. It would bring attention to whatever the phenomena is. So it's really weird. And one other thing I'd like to say, and I wish I would have given the photograph here, but you can go to my channel. I started a YouTube channel, so if you please like, share, and subscribe, it would be great, because I just hit at that 1,000 subscriber mark. But if you go to my behind the scenes of Rocky Mountain Ranch, I show the photo there. But that first night back on the ranch when I filmed with Beyond Skinwalker, we got an unexpected, really bad blizzard. I was taking the film crew to where I had the box encounter, which didn't make the episode, by the way, because they don't talk about the boxes on there. But the next morning, I had the day off of filming. Me and my daughter are having a burger at Red Robin Hamburger, going to go to the Outlet Mall in Castle Rock, and my back started hurting me. And I have a radiation burn that blistered, was hot to the touch, and it looks like a three-fingered. It's interesting you mentioned the three-fingered Sasquatch, and I never knew that before until tonight. But it's 3 fingers of, it looks like a hand print with 3 fingers on my back, on my shoulder. And I let the producers know right away. And what's interesting about that, and the Bigfoot connection that I'm making right now live, right here on your show, is it's on the episode. So I'm taking the film crew back to where I had this box encounter, and the snow is coming down hard. And out of nowhere are these bipedal large footprints, one in front of the other. They're not horse, they're not cow, they're not human. And what's interesting is they come out of nowhere. You see them walk, and then they disappear for maybe 12 feet, and then they reappear, and then disappear again. And we're all like, holy crap, I'm so glad we caught that on film, and it's in the episode. So that happened. And then I come up with that 3-fingered thing on my back. So
Well, before we go to Snippy, are you familiar with the cryptid that almost universally are called crawlers?
No, that sounds creepy.
Well, they are. They're very creepy.
Crawlers.
Ah,
Do you know what they are, Chris?
no.
Padre?
Yeah, they're sort of humanoid, but they're really, really frightening looking. And they
Skeletal.
They go along the ground, and you can see videos. I don't know if they're AI or not, but
Look them up, Katie. They're called the crawlers.
Crawlers. Are they like the inspiration for? Are they the inspiration for like all the new scary movies where you have the people like walking like whoa, like all weird? That's probably
They are.
That was all demonic. That's not demonic.
Well, that all goes back to the interdimensional concept. Okay, the interdimensional. If they're popping over from another universe, another dimension, it's hard to say what in the world we're dealing with. Now, what is interesting, there have been cases where people that were armed, that have encountered these things, have fired upon them without a lot of effect, supposedly. Now, I personally find that a little hard to believe, but unless I experienced it, I couldn't say. But those are very interesting accounts.
Yeah, I know that they had a creature like that at Skinwalker Ranch, and in Ohio Pile, they fired upon something unusual like that. So, and I'd also, one last thing, and then we'll move away from the ranch, even though the Snippy case kind of has ties to the ranch. In the 80s, and it's funny because I'm a co-host on UAP Studies podcast with Jason Guillemette and Dr. Michael Glawson, and we just recently had Jacques Vallée on, and so I asked him about the Skinwalker Ranch. But when NIDS was doing all their experiments and investigations at the Skinwalker Ranch, Bob Bigelow also owned Mount Wilson Ranch, and I'm good friends with Jeff McBurney and Nick Knack, who live there and own Mount Wilson Ranch. And going through Dr. Leo's files at the archives, we have photographs of the 80s of Bob Bigelow, Linda Moulton Howe, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Jacques Vallée, Kit Green, all these people, all these players in this field. You should have seen my wall downstairs for a couple months. I had all the, the aviary group, all the birds, I was trying to figure out who all these people are and what they're doing. But I asked Jacques Vallée, what are you guys doing there? And you could see him in the interview get a little uncomfortable with the question, because I know they're not supposed to talk about some of the things still. It's not disclosed yet. But he basically, his answer was that, they needed, in any good scientific study, you need 2 locations to do experiments on. So they, had the Mount Wilson Ranch and the Skinwalker Ranch. However, that being said, my son just recently pointed out to me, actually, that Area 51 is pretty close to Mount Wilson Ranch, and so is Dugway Proving Ground, and Mount Wilson is right in the middle. We know there's a Howard Hughes connection. We know he had his runway out there. We know there's things buried underground. And just recently, Jeff called me just a few days ago, and they're pulling out these big concrete lampposts out of the ground from Mount Wilson Ranch, and they have these symbols on them, and they're the face of Pan, and so it's very occult. So there is some occult stuff to this too, and there's some evidence there at the Rocky Mountain Ranch of occult practices that were going on.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In way of, so when they bought the ranch house, it sat vacant for a few years until the people who own it now bought it. But when they bought the house, there was an altar and some unusual things back in the tree line. So, and what's interesting about that, I'm meeting this family for the first time with cameras rolling for Beyond Skinwalker, and I'm learning all this stuff. They're learning about the history of the ranch. I'm learning about what they, encountered or what they found when they bought the place, and the cameras are rolling, and I'm learning about this altar in the tree line in the back of the house. And I'm turn the cameras off. I don't want this on film, which they did. And then later they pulled me aside and they said, just so you know, History Channel won't touch this stuff. And I'm good, because I don't want it I don't want to talk about it because it could be kind of dark and a little frightening. So I'm John Dover and Stan Milford Jr. kind of taught me how to protect myself and ground myself and do all that before I go onto the property. So I do that.
Katie, let's get into Snippy the horse.
Mm-hmm. Yay!
You wrote a book on it, correct?
Tony Angiola and I wrote a book along with the King family. So this came about in a very interesting way. A few years ago, 3 years ago now, Carrie King of the King family legacy, Nellie King was his great aunt. But anyway, they have a little event that they're hosting, and I've been honored to be a guest out there, and I've gotten to know them well. And one thing led to another, and some questions started coming up about,
Let's show a bigger picture of that Snippy the horse book.
There we go. Yeah, that's the one that's all edited and nice. So
Snippy the horse.
So the first thing I would like to address about Snippy is through the wonderful archives at the National UFO Historical Record Center. Thank goodness that they acquired the long lost APRO files, which APRO is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. And for over 35 years, these files they were lost. Okay. And so David Marler just acquired them. And in working with the King family from the San Luis Valley, I actually went down to the archives to try to find more things on the ranch because I'm always kind of selfish that way. But okay. Dave goes boom and lays all the Snippy stuff on the table. And in this thing, my mind was exploding. So next thing you know, I'm talking to the King family, and one thing leads to another, led to this book, which will be available at Contact in the Desert next month, end of May into June. But original audio recordings of Nellie and Burl and Don Richmond and Ken Steinmetz and Alice Richmond, original photographs of one of the big wrongs that we're writing here is that Snippy was a 3-year-old male gelding horse, not lady. And so we have never seen before pictures of Colt Snippy with mom lady. One of the pictures, and I'll show you here in a little bit, but never seen before pictures of evidence. I mean, the evidence on this is mind-blowing, and we'll get into this a little bit more. So much more information to this case than I ever imagined. I mean, I knew about it before, but not to the depth I know about it now. And there's so many connections to the Snippy case in the San Luis Valley, to the Elbert County case. We're talking boxes, hum sounds, circles on the ground, strange tools, green ooze, holes in the ground. Even Lonnie Zamora was involved. I mean, it goes deep. So I'm really excited. Since December, we've been doing a deep dive on all the original recordings and documents. And, in the 80s, Linda Moulton Howe interviews Burl Lewis. And for some reason, he started this cockamamie story. And what the family and I believe is that he wanted the story to go away. So we thought he'd make up this lady story. And instead of making it go away, now it's like everybody talks about Snippy lady. But, he had just lost Nellie. Nellie, unfortunately, commits suicide. And we can talk about that here in a little bit, too. But right after that, he marries a woman named Barbara Holloway. He's working at the San Luis Valley Country Club. And I'm sure he was sick to death of the Snippy thing and wanted it to go away. So Linda Howe was gracious to write a nice letter. David Marler wrote the foreword to the book. And you could see on that image that you just put up there, Chris, that Linda Howe put both Dave and Linda put 2 little quotes on the back cover, which I'm super proud of.
There? Yeah.
Yeah, I can read them. So
Dave Marler, go ahead.
Linda Moulton Howe says, cheers to a lot more truth about the universe we're in, full of consciousness and life, Linda Moulton Howe. And then David Marler, what the reader holds in their hands is the definitive text on this case. The provenance of information from which it is based is without question. The tireless effort at organizing it all is to be commended, David Marler. So what an honor to have Linda and Dave really kind of get behind this project. And it's just been a treasure trove of lost documents and recordings and photographs. It's just amazing. And I sent some to share. You guys will be the first to see some of these photographs. So.
All right. Well, we got the photographs loaded. And also, I don't know anything about Snippy the horse. So please, What does Snippy the horse have to do with the occult or ghosts or goblins or
so
UFOs?
This image right here, you can kind of see the condition Snippy was found in. But before we had viral videos, Snippy was the first, and Dawn knows this. It was sort of the first globally recognized animal mutilation case to go global. It was September 7th, 1967, and it made worldwide news all around the globe. So there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles about Snippy the horse. Snippy the horse, in a nutshell, what's really interesting about this, and was so great getting the original documents from both Nightcap and APRO, but there were 4 horses that were pastured on the King Ranch. Smokey was a black horse. And Smokey actually died the week before Snippy, which not a lot of people know about. Smokey was 14 hands high, 1,200-pound black horse, and supposedly died from a rattlesnake bite. But he was bit in the back hind. And in the research we've done on rattlesnake bites with a horse that big, it would have to bite him right in the throat in order to take down a horse that big. Like
really?
This snake did not kill this horse. So Smokey dies the week before Snippy's mutilation. What's really cool too, in the archives, there's handwritten maps of the crime scene, right? Where we have Chico brushes in the valley grow to be 5 to 6 feet tall. Around Snippy's mutilated carcass, they were smashed down to 5-6 inches, burned, kind of very similar to the Socorro case. There was this weird gizzard-like tool that was taken and tested where it had this green ooze coming out of it. There were these holes around this bush, and I think I have a picture of the holes there. But there was a large 75-foot diameter circle, just like Elbert County. There were 5 15-foot circles around that large circle. God, there's so much evidence around this thing. But what also is interesting, so Snippy was bare, 3-year-old Appaloosa colt, was bare from the neck up, brain cavity missing, this white powder was found. Dr. Altschuler, who was unknown or wanted to go unnamed at the time, but later came forward in the late 80s to Lyndall Howe, examined the carcass, was very mysterious. So in this book, in the back, you'll have all sorts of original documents to look at on this case, but a very mysterious, first really well-recognized animal mutilation case that is still unsolved. And another interesting thing, so one of the maps that was in the file, you can see the 3 horses. There was Sheba, which was a brown horse, and Lady, Snippy's mother, who was a gray dapple, also a big horse, 14 hands high, 1,200 pounds. And then Snippy was a 3-year-old Appaloosa gelding. And so there were 3 horses. You see all 3 horses' tracks, because it was really rainy that week and stuff. So there's good tracks in there. And you see them being corralled like in a zigzag shape, right? And you see Lady and Sheba's tracks going back off to the King Ranch. You see Snippy milling, going in circles. And then about 35 feet, there's no tracks. It's like something picked up the horse and dropped it. So Snippy's right leg was broken. You can see in the photograph, and his back left leg was bare. And I have that photograph too, if you want to show that one, Chris.
Yeah, let's see if we can.
Okay, there's
it.
Okay, yeah, here's
Go
a
ahead.
yeah. Okay, well, I can tell you these are some of the indentations that were, and I just found another case in Nightcap that's very similar to this that we talk about in the book. But these are holes around the Chico brush. This is the smashed Chico brush, and kind of very similar to Socorro case. So they actually took cast moldings of these. They were 2 inches wide and 4 inches deep, and they compared them to the Lonnie Zamora. So there's a picture there of Lonnie Zamora too, and his molding. And and there was Don Richmond, and they compared them. Now, Tony Angiola and Ben Moss did a deep dive on the Socorro case, so I could say that they're not all that similar really, but it's kind of cool that they did at least take the time to compare them. So yeah, but I think I have a picture of Snippy, and you can see his broken leg and his bare back left leg, which nobody talks about. Oh, that's another one we'll talk about.
Well, we'll get a bit there, but I'm trying to find Snippy the horse here.
Yeah. Oh, there's another strange track. We'll get to that.
No, I don't think we You
don't have
Oh,
him?
wait a minute. There
he is. Okay.
There he is, Snippy.
So here's Snippy. So you could see there was this black tar under his head. He was completely drained of blood, but you could see his back. I always get that mixed up because I'm dyslexic. Back right leg was broken. You can clearly see the break. And then you can see the bare, and that's never reported. His bare left back hind leg was also bare, just like his neck and head, which was rarely talked about. Another weird anomaly about this case, when they found Snippy, his head and neck were bleached white, like it had been laying in the sun for years. And then it turned this bright pink color, and then it turns this dark black color. And it's very unusual. And the examiners that examined, there were quite a few, could not explain that strange anomaly. Why those bones would change color like that. High radiation readings around the area, but when they got close to the carcass, the readings went down, which is counterintuitive to what people report. If you get so that was very unusual. It should be the opposite. Another thing, just like Don was saying, no animals would touch this thing for a long time. In fact, they could see in the map that was drawn, you could see coyotes were milling around the carcass, but would never approach the carcass. After Snippy had been laying there for a while, eventually maggots and coyotes started to eat on them. But what was reported is these animals that eventually gnawed on Snippy's carcass died of dysentery and started foaming at the mouth. Even the maggots died. So something, was killing the coyotes that eventually ate on Snippy's flesh, which is horrible. Another thing we learned in opening up this case, the ranch right next to the King Ranch was the McGuire Ranch, and it was known as the Dead Cow Ranch. So in the reports, and we have photographs in here as well, maybe I can give you a sneak peek. But here, we had calves that were going blind. Or they would have long hoofs, that would grow enormously long. And what's really sad is McGuire, a week after examining Snippy's carcass, he passes away. And that's true with several of the investigators that investigated the Snippy case, died within a year or two of the case.
Did they have any similarity of how they died? Was autopsies done? They said they all died of cancer, or what's that?
Yeah, we were trying to look that up through like Ancestry and obituaries and that, and we're not sure. What was that? Mr. Wellington. The Wellington Ranch. What was I saying? McGuire. Sorry, the Wellington Ranch. I'm saying it wrong. The Wellington Ranch. My apologies.
So Snippy, when they discovered Snippy's death, right? Mm-hmm. They found him in an unusual place. Am I right on that, Katie?
Not too far from the ranch house, actually. So not too unusual.
But he was confined to a certain place. So you said that somebody or something had to lift him up in the air and drop him there. Mm-hmm. Was there an indentation under him, like he was dropped from a great height? Do you know if there was
they didn't report on that. But what's interesting about that is there was a couple by the name of the Wilsons, and they used to, because during this time in the San Luis Valley in 1967, 66, 67, and still to this day, if you guys want to see a UAP, go to the San Luis Valley. So there was a lot of UAPs being spotted, people seeing things going in and out of Mount Blanca, which is right there, speculations of underground bases and things like that, which is also interesting. And I think there's something to that. However, so they're up at the Uraca Cemetery, which is a very small little cemetery up there sky watching. On the night of Snippy's capture or mutilation, they're seeing lights over the valley. So I don't know if that's a witness to Snippy's mutilation.
I think we have a picture of that. Let's see. There might be some, I think we showed it.
Yeah, this is a picture. So, here, this is a great picture. You want to go back to that one for a minute? So,
right here, okay.
Yeah, this is, exclusively here. This was in the archives. This is a picture of Lady and Alice. And then the horse to her right there is Sheba. So it says Lady, Snippy's mother. These two horses, Sheba and Lady, were the horses that were with Snippy in the pasture when killed, only witnesses to Snippy's murder. And what's interesting about this is in the reports, it states how So first of all, Snippy was never shoed. Snippy was never saddled. Snippy only was trained to hold and lead. And the week after, he was going to be saddled for the first time. So Snippy was never ridden on. Smokey was ridden on, and Sheba was ridden on, and we believe Lady as well. But Lady and Sheba, in the report, said Alice Richmond knew these horses well and would feed them sugar cubes, and they were very friendly horses. After Snippy's capture and mutilation, they were really skittish, and we have multiple pictures of them trying to get pictures of both Lady and Sheba after Snippy's death. And of course, Smokey, we lost the week before, and they were super skittish, would walk away. Also, we found in some of these old photographs, the night that we believe Snippy was captured, Agnes King, who was in her 80s, witnessed something large come over the King Ranch. And in looking at the photographs, we have a photograph that's in the book. You have to get the book, but there's an oblong-shaped craft in one of the photographs. It's very clear. And there's another picture. So 3 of the fence posts were sheared off, and as if like butter went through them. And in that picture, we see like a disc-shaped craft with like this energy field around it, which is in the book as well. So it was just like one mind-blowing thing after another, after another, after another.
Before I get into some questions, I want to go to the Padre. Dan, do you have some questions for Katie? You're muted. Padre, you're muted.
People have been trying to mute me for years. Anyway, look at the petroglyphs and the hieroglyphics. They're not hieroglyphics, what to call when they're Native American, but those are quite common in the Green River area along the Utah border. Mm-hmm. And in the area around the ranch where you were there any caves that were found, or anything inside caves that had any kind of evidence of something that might tie into what was going on at the ranch?
Yeah, there was a shaman cave, and they would leave offerings there. They still to this day, and there's some Native American petroglyphs, and even around the Palmer Divide, and there I know there are some. There's some I'm yet to find, and I want to find them. But also in the San Luis Valley with Snippy, we know that there's talk of the ant people, right, and the great sand dunes and the quartz crystals and the anomalies. And something also I found interesting in researching the San Luis Valley for Snippy the horse is NASA for decades, and kind of ties to the Lonnie Zamora Socorro case. They use this area because of the unusual geological aspects, or very similar to the moon surface and the volcanic rock and things around in the valley. So they would use the valley for, experiments for lunar landings and things like that. So I'm like, if maybe some of the stuff people were seeing were that, but certainly doesn't explain Snippy and all the animal mutilations and all that.
On Snippy's carcass, were there any tissue samples taken for toxicology to find out if there was, you mentioned these other creatures they eventually did feed on, got very sick or died. What did they find out with toxicology?
Yeah, and that'll be included in the book as well. They not only did toxicology on some of the Snippy stuff, but they also did toxicology on this weird gizzard. So there was this weird gizzard looking like tool. They explain it, Nellie explains it as like a tool, and she picked it up with 2 sticks, and as they poked it, this green ooze came out of it, and it was like a seaweed kind of material or something. The thing was like seaweed. So they took that to the lab as well, and the results of those will be in the book also. I think they're kind of inconclusive from what I recall, but Dr. Altschuler had, he was mystified by what happened to Snippy, and he had his own encounters out there in the valley as well, because he was very curious. He didn't want his name known at the time, but he certainly experienced his own sightings out there in the valley.
Don,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
The other horses that were with Snippy at the time, were they altered in their behavior after that in any way?
Yeah, there was, just like that picture Chris just put up. You see Mother Lady and Sheba used to be very friendly horses, and they were just very skittish after that, and never, they turned away. There's another picture, it's in the book, where they're just walking off, not very friendly after that anymore. So they were spooked for sure, tail between the legs, everything. Yeah, so, and they talk about that. They write about that in the reports.
Okay, thank you.
Don, what do you have?
Well, what Katie said earlier about the ranchers arming themselves and what have you, you're familiar with Kevin Randall, Katie? Okay.
Roswell.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I've known Kevin for a very long time. We both have our military things in the background together. And after he came back, he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam. After he came back, he went into the Guard. Okay, he was became an intelligence officer. Was deployed to Iraq during the recent kerfluffle over there 10, 15 years ago. And we're talking one day about mutilations. And I know, because I had been a law enforcement officer up in the Northwest, all right, Idaho, and we had cases and what have you that would pop up. And that's when I was involved, or I got really deeply involved in the human mutilation research. And at any rate, so we're talking about this, and he said, well, do you know what happened to me after I got back? And I said, no. He said, well, I was on a training flight. We were flying, I guess, through Colorado, Montana. He was on a military helicopter. He was a pilot. And he said, as we're flying over these ranch lands, he said, suddenly I thought I was back in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, ranchers were out there, saw our helicopters. I guess they were fearful we were mutilators, and they started shooting at us.
Yep.
And the helicopter got hit.
Yep.
Okay.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I said, wow, man, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that it's very real. And I'll tell you what, those ranchers were dead serious.
Yeah.
Those animals are expensive. You have a couple of mutilations, that's thousands of dollars out of your wallet. And these guys were bound and determined, to let nothing go by the way. Now, when we were publishing UFO magazine, I had, and Vicki and I both had, a lot of articles over the years concerning mutilations. We knew most of the investigators, and one thing that hit me, all right, now I knew some police officers also that were involved in this investigation. There were some people that came forward. Now, I don't know if this was a disinformation attempt or what, but they were trying to claim that these mutilators were actually people driving out into the fields, getting a cow. They had mortician equipment with them, like to drain the blood out, because that's one thing with the real mutilation, the exsanguination, is almost every time. And what I mean by that, the blood is totally removed from the animal. You won't find any on the ground or even around the wounds.
Right.
So however they're doing that, and I got an addendum about the blood thing. But anyway, they tried to convince people that there was nothing suspicious, supernatural, ET about these at all, which, of course, was not true.
Right.
Now, John Keel. Okay, everybody should know who John Keel was. Mothman Prophecies and many Operation Trojan Horse. Been a long time 14 investigator. I talked to Keel about this many times. And Keel told me, okay, he had a theory about what these mutilations were. And I just throw this out for the heck of it, okay? You can accept it, discard it. I personally got to say I discarded it. But he would never entertain the idea of extraterrestrials. To him, it was all ultra-terrestrial. In other words, interdimensional. And he told me that he believed these mutilators were using the blood and flesh and material they were taking from animals to create creatures like the MIB. And he went into a long diatribe about that. And although the MIB, there are some very weird things about encounters with the men in black, but Keel was convinced they were manufactured by these intelligences, whatever they are, that were mutilating the animals. So that's just another little throwaway factoid there for you.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. And one of the theories, Stan Gordon does a great book on Bigfoot and UFOs. And one of his, his theories, and I kind of agree, and based on just some of the stuff that happened at the Rocky Mountain Ranch, that one of my theories that makes sense to me, I mean, we have an elk connection and cow and horse, right? These are large animals, and the Sasquatch. So are some of the Sasquatch, are they bodyguards or workers? Do they have anything to do with some of these mutilations? Now, some of them might be military where they're testing groundwater. Maybe that's a percentage. But some of them are so highly unusual. And I say this because one of my favorite cases, I drove to Wyoming and did an interview with somebody whose family is just generational back in Kiowa, Colorado, and Elbert County. And right out of high school, so this would have been 1978, 79, she and her husband buy property out in Rama, Colorado, very close to Elbert County borderline, and they have several heads of cattle. The husband's out on horseback checking the cows for calves, comes across a dead calf on the ground. The calf has 4 cuts in a perfect square with the top of the fur removed, but the skin was still there. He gets back on his horse, and this is miles off the county road, gets my witness, Sheila. They come back in the pickup truck. She said it took them 20 to 25 minutes. These are very credible witnesses. And when they got back, that calf had been mutilated, organs removed, blood drained, no tracks around the horse other than what he left with the horse. They said it felt eerie. They felt watched, terrified them to death. And what's cool about that is she's like, hey, Katie, I found the pictures I found the Polaroids of these. So she sent them to me on Facebook. I believe you could see them in some of my episodes somewhere if you just search it. But they had the picture of that calf that was mutilated, but they also had pictures of little calves that what they look like when a coyote jumps up and just tears at them, right? I mean, completely different. This is cauterized, organs removed, blood drained. Something I also heard, Don, about, and I believe it's Linda Howe. There's 3. I didn't like doing the mutilations because I'm like, Linda Howe's on that. That's her thing. Chuck Zukowski did a lot of work. And then the late Chris O'Brien, who we just lost, Chris O'Brien, did a lot of books actually on the Valley too. And I was looking so forward to working with Chris, both Tony and I on the Snippy case, because he lived out in the Valley for a while. But one of the theories that they had too was what they did, or the ETs, if it's true that they put whatever concoction on their skins for nutrients, there's copper in these animals' blood, and that the ETs needed copper. And that's why they drain the blood, or maybe they're making the food pills like in the Carl Higdon case. That's another theory.
Did Chris O'Brien ever tell you about his Joker experience?
No. What's that?
Well, he was doing, as you said, he was doing a lot of investigations into the mutilation. Mm-hmm. Stalking the Herd was a book of his that he wrote. And so I'm talking to O'Brien one day, and he said, oh, man, let me tell you what happened. He said, and he said, you're probably not going to believe this. And I said, Chris, you wouldn't believe the things that I've been told over the years. And he said, I was at my house, and this was out there near Clearstone or
Creststone.
Creststone. And he said, one day, he said, he had been working on something, the concept of the Joker. In other words, the phenomenon.
The trickster.
Toying with you.
Yeah. Trickster.
He heard this helicopter, and he stuck his head out the door. Here was this bright yellow helicopter hovering just maybe 30, 40, 50 feet off the ground, right there hovering at his house. And it was an antique helicopter. He said it was something from like back in the 50s. And then this thing just lifted up, took off, and that was the end of it. And I said, well, what'd you make out of that? He said, well, to tell you the truth, I think somebody was sending me a message.
Oh,
Okay, Chris. All
what was
right.
the message? What was the message?
I don't know.
Just back off. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I have my own conspiracy theories. Yes, believe it or not, I do. But there's something to Mount Blanca. I believe there might be something underground out there in the valley. Actually, tomorrow night, we're going to stay in Alamosa. We're going to go do a ghost hunt out at the Uraca Cemetery. Because one of the things, so it's an unfortunate ending to Nellie's story, who owns Snippy the horse. But unfortunately, her mother, Agnes, dies. And they were really close. And, she was into some esoteric things and, of course, looking for answers to all these unusual things they're all experiencing out there in the valley. And unfortunately, the day of her mother's funeral, she goes to the Uraca Cemetery and takes her life on that same day. And also Agnes's, Nellie's sister at age 13 dies of pneumonia, and she was twins. There was Faye and May. So the Uraca Cemetery is said to be haunted by May, one of the twin girls. So tomorrow night we'll be headed up there. We're going to go find, they put a stake in the ground actually way back in the 60s where Snippy lay. So we're going out with metal detectors to find the actual site of Snippy, fly the drone, if we can find it, fingers crossed we actually can locate it. We're going out there with the King family, Carrie King. And we're going to look for, one of the theories too on Snippy is that he was shot twice, and that's what killed him, gunshot wounds. But on the recordings from Nellie and Burl and the investigators, there were two boys that admitted shooting Snippy the carcass post-mortem, and that they were going to sign an affidavit testifying to, yes, we shot the horse post-mortem. So Snippy was not killed by lightning. Snippy was not killed by gunshot wounds. And it still remains this incredible mystery.
Well, what killed Snippy, Katie? What did they ever do an autopsy? They did autopsies. They did autopsies. We have sightings of balls of light. I mean, it's just a fascinating, unusual case. It's still left a mystery. We don't know what killed Snippy, but certainly the back leg was broken as if dropped from above. Right. Maybe maybe they screwed up on this one, and I don't know. But I mean, his leg is clearly broken. Maybe they thought it was a cow and they got it wrong. Why did they leave the carcass out there? I mean,
why do they leave the carcass of the cows and the other horse? And I mean, that's a great question. Is it a warning? Is it, Linda Howe's been asking that, and, George Knapp and Chris O'Brien and Chuck Zukowski, why are they leaving this? Is it a warning? Is it, look what we can do? Is it, we don't know what else to do with it? We took what we need. We don't want to take the dead thing back. I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's a good question, All
right. I got two pictures that the Padre had loaded about this crawler thingamajig. Okay. And another picture. First, I want to show you this picture because I have no idea what this is about.
Oh, yeah. This is the boys McFedries. And so they were out there. Of course, they saw the headlines and went out in their cool Mustang. I love that car right there. And they are doing sky watches out in the valley. Yeah. And this is just a photograph that made the front page of the newspaper at the time of a ball of light out there in the valley. And, there's several of these encounters that were documented, thank goodness. I mean, so much so, I think Chris did 3 books, and we're at 400 pages and probably could do a whole other book. So, and it's still a very active location. It's just incredible.
And we were talking about crawlers, and I don't know what a crawler is, but this is uglier than hell.
Oh, no, thank you. That's creepy.
Anything like that on the ranch, Katie?
Mm-mm. If there was, I can guarantee you I'd never go back. I mean, 2B guys are scary enough, but they're kind of pathetic looking. These things are terrifying. No. Yeah, no.
Some people speculated it's transitioning Skinwalker, going from one form to another.
Yeah.
You know, that brings me to an interesting thing, Katie. Was there any skinwalkers seen on the ranch? I mean, like wolves and stuff like that?
Yeah, there were big cryptid birds that were seen there. And in fact, when we were launching the rockets, me and one of the rocket guys heard, it sounded like a huge bird, like
a pterodactyl?
Yeah, there was pterodactyls seen. There were these phoenix type birds. And what's interesting about that too, in the ranch that was 14 miles away, they too saw like phoenixes or cryptid birds. And there was also this platypus type cryptid. And what's interesting about that platypus creature was seen out in the San Luis Valley. It's reported there. And my daughter and I, back early on when we're driving around Kiowa, like I'm just starting to get back into researching all this stuff, there was a weird creature that drove right in front of my Jeep, and it looked like a duck-billed platypus. And we stopped the Jeep, we jumped out, we're looking in the brush, like, what was that thing? We went back home, got on the internet, looking at all the, local wildlife. I'm like, that wasn't it. And so I don't know what it was we saw. And then there's these strange, so Greg that lives on the ranch now, there's a pond right on the ranch. And if you go to my YouTube channel, Rocky Mountain Ranch with Katie Paige, I do a little interview there, and you could see these weird, they look like big frog. What are they called?
Lizard?
Like salamanders, and they're all dead around this pond, and this pond sometimes is dried up, but they're not native to the area of the ranch. It's really, really strange. And another thing, one of the viewers watching Beyond Skinwalker reached out to me, and they said, on the ranch property, there's this supposed motorcycle kind of track or whatever, but very clearly to me, and you can see it on my channel, it says CIA written in plain sight. You can see it from above. CIA. Holy shit.
Salamanders are one of these species that scientists look to because they're very environmentally sensitive. So that would indicate that something had changed in their environment to make it toxic. And
that's interesting.
Those dead. You said this was around a pond?
It's around the pond on the ranch. I have photographs. Greg that owns the ranch. He has one frozen.
Oh, you have one of them frozen?
Yeah, he has one of them frozen right now. And then that's another thing I want to bring up too about the ranch and also the Carl Higdon case. And I have a drawing here. So people ask me, are like things still happening out there? And the answer to that is yes. And this is a case that occurred November 2021, and this is the witness's drawing. And he's an elk hunter. He's a firefighter, and he's a elk hunter. Big tough guy. So he's out there in Elbert County hunting, has his pickup truck parked. He looks into the tree line, and this is part of the forest where he's always uncomfortable. And this is he's like, I don't know why I'm uncomfortable. I just won't go back there. But he sees what he described as two pie pans, one on top of the other, the top spinning counterclockwise, the bottom spinning clockwise. It's emitting this orange glow. And then he sees it for a few seconds and the thing vanishes. No sound, no nothing. And he hightails it to his pickup truck. It scared him. And what's interesting, so me and Tony and this witness go back to where he sees this thing, and I have the video and stuff. And right where this thing was hovering is an elk track. And I think there's an elk connection to this. Same with the Carl Higdon case. There's something weird going on with the elk, and going back to the cattle and the blood and the copper. Elk have copper in their blood as well. And I think about Carl Higdon. Are you guys familiar with that case? Where they float the food pills over to him, also one, and he goes, no. There's a lot of evidence in that case too. We actually went on location to the Carl Higdon site. It's on my YouTube channel as well. But there's pictures in Dr. Sprinkle's folders of a box. There's a box in his case too. And you can see the box imprint on the ground at the Carl Higdon site. We have his medical records. Dr. Leo Sprinkle talked to the doctors. His truck was far away. That case is a great case too, because there's so much evidence in that case. It's pretty wild.
Katie, I want to show you another picture, and then maybe you could talk about this.
Oh, that, yeah. So this was in the Snippy files out there at the National UFO Historical Record Center. And it's, as investigators, I'm going to disclose that there's another picture of two of these tracks that are fairly close together that make me think they could possibly be bear. but they're kind of unusual. If you look at bear tracks, I don't know what those long razor kind of things are for the toes. But they were around the snippy carcass. So again, I don't know if they're bear or if they're some cryptid creature. I'm not sure. But those are photographs taken around the snippy site.
Whatever it was pretty big and heavy, though.
Right, exactly. And it was muddy then. So, I mean, the graft was kind of
Big
soft.
claws.
So yeah, and bear, when we were comparing the bear, they don't look quite like that. So, another little one of those clues, I guess you could call it.
I've spent a lot of time in the woods with wild animals, and that's not a bear track.
That's not a bear track?
No.
All right. I'll put you in the book. Let me quote you. We don't have the final copy yet. I'll put your quote. It's not a bear.
Katie, what is your opinion about military presence on some of these ranches? I mean,
I don't know if I can get to it. My opinion on that is, well, first of all, on this the choppers, if you go to my website, katiepaige.net, which is PAIGE.net, I have the PDF of this. I can send this to you, or you can go to Rocky Mountain Ranch Research and you can reach out to me and I'll send it to you. But there's data that they were really doing a deep dive on, these blacked out helicopters and that, days of the week, months of the year, daytime sightings, nighttime sightings, different states. You could see Colorado was by far hit the hardest with these. So I have no question, at least for Rocky Mountain Ranch, that there's a military presence there. We know that for a fact. We have documents of this over and over and over again. I think they were doing some black access projects out there.
Okay, but I mean, have they ever been sighted out there besides the helicopters, like actual uniformed personnel out there doing things?
Yeah, in fact, John Duke, who I don't believe is his real name, he says he was part of Air Defense Command. We know that there were soldiers there from Camp Carson and other references to that in the documents. We know that NORAD and the United States Air Force head had a directive to handle UFOs and Bigfoot. And talking to men and women that are out there at the United States Air Force Academy right now in Colorado Springs, they still have sightings of Sasquatch out in the forest outside the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So, just a lot of little clues like that. And going back and pulling the maps from the United States Air Force Academy back in the mid to late 70s, they actually owned a lot of the property over into the Black Forest, which too has a lot of sightings, over I-25 into the Black Forest that kind of butted up to the Rocky Mountain Ranch. So there's no question in my mind that that's a piece of the puzzle. I don't think it answers everything. There's no way that it does. And I really do think the activity predated the military presence. And there's still stuff happening to this day. So,
Don.
Sir.
Do you have anything to say about the military presence, seeing how you spent a lot of time there?
Yeah. Tell us.
Look, going back to 1947, okay, when this really exploded across not only the United States, but the world, this phenomenon was viewed by the powers that be, the senior military officers, as a genuine threat to national security, okay? Now, as I've stated on this show many times, it's my firm belief that they found something in Roswell or the aftermath of Roswell, which today is considered a core secret. And this core secret is surrounded by a special access program folder. In other words, that means if you don't have a need to know, you never will. This whole disclosure business, never going to happen. Never. Okay. The only way that might change is if these visitors, and I'm using air quotes, decided to reveal themselves. But they've been here since humanity began. And they've shown, at least in the last couple of thousand years, no indication they're going to do that. So the bottom line is the military has always considered this probably to be the ultimate threat. Look, we discovered, and I could go off on a whole new route here,
Well, we only got 2 minutes.
I know. We discovered things on the moon. All right. They've been here a very, very long time. The astronauts, for the most part, have been silenced. Gordon Cooper. I knew Gordon Cooper. Okay. Spent hours with the man over at his office in Van Nuys. He went before the United Nations to talk about this in the late 70s. Okay. It was all brushed aside. Today, it's a little bit different since 2017, but the bottom line is there's something there the military is scared to death of, and I have no doubt they've got their fingers into everything dealing with this phenomenon.
It's the big black box soul recycler on the moon. I found that document in John Schuessler's. Yep.
John Lear.
Katie, we got 1 minute left. Final thoughts, and tell us how we can get your 2 books, one on Leo Sprinkle and Snippy the Horse.
Yeah, you can visit my site, and I put an image there of my YouTube channel, and I truly appreciate any subscriptions to my YouTube channel. It's free. It just helps me out. I just hit that 1,000 mark, so I want to keep chugging on that. But it's Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige on YouTube. You can find me at katiepaige.net, which is PAIGE.net. And you can find me at RockyMountainRanchResearch.org. And feel free to reach out to me. I love hearing people's encounters, and I'm always trying to make these connections. So I appreciate you guys having me on. And as far as the book, it'll be available at the end of May. You can get it, autographed by Carrie King and Tony and I at Contact in the Desert. I will be there. I'll be speaking and showing all the pictures on Monday out there at Contact in the Desert. And that's about it.
Katie, this has been delightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Well, folks, we got to wrap it up right there because that's our show. And Katie, thank you so much for being a great guest with us tonight. We're going to have you on soon. And for Don Eckert, Dan the Padre, and myself, have a great night and keep looking up in the sky. You never know.